Hi, my name is Sang, and these are the pictures that I found while browsing a zero waste Facebook group during summer 2021. All of these produce that you're seeing, they're not being sent to end consumers. They're not being sent to the grocery store. They're being sent to the landfill. According to the World's Resource Institute, approximately 1/4 of all food produced for human consumption is wasted every year. And more specifically, within Canada, 58% of all food produced is wasted every year, and almost $50 billion of that is avoidable waste. So how did we get here? There's a lot of reasons why food are wasted, but this specific problem that I'm talking about, well, it's a peculiar one, and let me tell you more about it. Within Canada alone, roughly $3.1 billion worth of produce is wasted every year due to cosmetic reasons. This means that the produce are either misshapen, have some damages, or considered a surplus. And while many of us know that food waste is a big problem, what we don't talk about enough is the unattainable standards that we impose on something that's as basic as fruit and vegetable. For some reason, we expect produce to always look picture perfect, shiny and beautiful when we walk into a grocery store. And this beauty issue exists all over the world, but mostly in first world countries where we have the privilege to pick and choose. In the produce industry, there are actually grading systems based on a few things: blemishes, size, and color. But nature isn't uniform. Nature is intense, it's unpredictable, and somewhat imperfect. And this applies to produce too. So in this sense, grade A produce, which is what you usually see in the grocery store, are essentially picture perfect. But what I want to focus on is the grade B produce, which is commonly known as imperfect or secondary produce. These produce are those that don't have a home to go to because they are either odd looking, too big, too small, or have some scratches and bruises. Or maybe they're just considered surplus. And the grade B produce exists due to a few reasons. Number one, environmental condition. When crops are grown, things such as rain or sunlight or wind can greatly affect what the produce turn out to look like. Maybe a hail could leave a few dents on a melon, for example. There's also an aspect of human error, because no matter how rigorous quality control is, we can't catch all the bad apples, so to say. During shipping and handling, things are also bound to get banged up. And last but not least, supply and demand fluctuations. And this often causes surplus produce because, let's say, bananas are shipped to a warehouse, but they ripen too fast overnight and now they can't be sent to grocery stores anymore, or demand changed over time. There are only specific channels that these peculiar and surplus produce can go to. More often than not, farmers compost them, or they're donated to food banks, and a very small portion of them get upcycled. But really, there's no shortage of food waste, and this is mainly due to a distribution problem. Meanwhile, Canada is experiencing the highest increase in food costs since 2010, amounting to almost $700 per family of 4 on an annual basis. And with excess food, nobody's winning. Farmers and distributors lose out on revenue, while people aren't able to eat otherwise edible food. Food waste also accelerates the climate crisis, contributing up to 10% of greenhouse gas emission every year. And this can lead to extreme weather events over the course of a few years, leading to things such as wildfires or flooding, for example. And this is exactly what led me to start Peko Produce. The name Peko is derived from the word peculiar, because what we do is we recover these peculiar and surplus produce and we deliver them to consumer at a discounted price. This idea came to me when I was a university student at the University of British Columbia and during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is how it works. Peko Produce purchases these surplus and peculiar produce from local farmers and wholesalers. We then aggregate them into a mystery box weighing anywhere between 10 to 12 pounds with roughly 10 varieties, and we deliver them to consumer at a price at up to 40% off grocery stores. We're not the first in the world to pursue this concept. but we're humbled to be the first online grocery store in Canada dedicated to reducing food waste, and we are starting now in Vancouver. With Peko, we hit two birds with one stone. First, we combat an inefficient food system, and second, we sell fresh produce that have no home to go to people who want it at a much discounted price, which therefore promote access to affordable and healthy diets. But I would have never been able to do this alone. I was lucky enough to meet my co-founder, Ariel Locke, over the pandemic, who actually don't even live in the same city or go to the same school as me. And while we're both business students who were very much on track to getting cushy corporate job, we bond over our shared passion to use social entrepreneurship as an agent for change and as a way to achieve self-fulfillment. And in our case, we wanted to start a company to help reduce food waste and promote access to affordable and healthy foods. Obviously, food waste is such a big, humongous global problem that we're not getting rid of ourselves. And some people have asked me why even try. I've seen concepts like yours and they're doomed to fail. And maybe they're right. Peculiar and surplus produce is just a subsegment of the food waste problem. Vancouver in Canada is also a subsegment of the world. But we didn't start up trying to solve this global issue. For me, the inspiration came when I moved to Canada from Vietnam in 2017 to pursue university and start noticing the amount of household food waste that I personally generate. And that made me feel really bad knowing that I'm wasting money and wasting food. So I decided to ask why and do something about it. There are many problems all over the world right now. Climate change, war, pandemic. And most of them seem too big and far-fetched to even try solving. And you might think that your work might not even make a dent. But that doesn't mean that you should not try. Rome wasn't built in one day. And doing something is still better than doing nothing. Imagine if all 7 billion people in the world have the same mindset. Imagine the world we can build. When I first started my startup Peko, along with Ariel around 7 and 8 months ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be here today. Ariel and I actually had absolutely no experience in the produce industry, except a few internships in the food tech and consumer goods world. Yet, after half a year of figuring things out on the fly, sore backs from moving heavy boxes, and a few mental breakdowns, we've gotten the hang of it. We've been able to save more than 75,000 pounds of food from being wasted, which is roughly equal to 21,000 meals. And since our boxes are up to 40% off grocery store prices, we have also been able to save our customer more than $150,000 in their grocery bills. And this is enough to feed a family for 13 years. This figure still boggles my mind. Even though these numbers might seem so small in the grand scheme of things, the more rewarding thing I've come to realize is the impact that we're making on actual human lives. In November 2021, the province of British Columbia in Canada had a major historical weather event. Within a month, a lot of rainfall had happened, and that led to a lot of landslide and flooding. This completely destroyed the highways that connect British Columbia with the rest of Canada, damaging infrastructure, displacing people, and even costing multiple lives. A report about climate change that recently came out from the United Nations actually called this one of the top 10 costliest climate event of 2021. And this really hits close to home, because a few friends and I were actually caught in a landslide accident while traveling on this highway. We lost everything, but luckily came out with just a few scratches and bruises. But more importantly, this experience really put things into perspective for me. I noticed that the climate crisis is here, it's happening, and I also noticed the urgency of our actions as a collective to even remotely slow this down. The day after our accident, grocery stores were wiped out everywhere in British Columbia, even in metropolitan area where the food supply chain is not necessarily as affected. Because major transport routes were broken, Peko Produce also saw a significant increase in surplus produce for us to pick up. And because of the broken highways, all these produce has to stay within British Columbia. They could not be sent out anywhere else. And within the same week that I almost died, essentially, the community demand for Peko completely rose in tenfold. At that point, I've worked in the industry for about 5 months, but that was the first time I see my impact so clearly. In the most twisted timeline and story possible, our mission to reduce food waste was being realized on a much, much larger scale. Just a few days after my accident, I was in my produce warehouse, coordinating with my co-founder to provide aid to the community in time of need. We were able to send out hundreds of boxes of fresh produce to people who want them, people who can't buy anything from grocery stores. We were able to fill up community fridges and donating to remote communities. And to say that I was heartened and fulfilled is an understatement. Selfishly, I want to keep feeling that. Less selfishly, I want to keep doing things that leave a positive impact on the world. Starting Peko Produce has been a big realization for me. I realized that there's an intersection where social impact, self-fulfillment, and entrepreneurial pursuits can meet, and I don't necessarily have to sacrifice one for another. I also realized that as an individual, I do have the power to make change, or at least mobilize others to join forces. Being a social entrepreneur also humbled me a ton because I got to bond with people from all walks of life over the basics, in an era where we talk about flashy things like colonizing Mars to NFTs. Peko also keeps me grounded, literally, because I'm working with things that's coming out of our soil and learning from the people who keep us fed. During the time that I've worked on Peko, I've seen quite a few atrocious things, many of which I've already talked about, but I want to show you what I mean. On the screen, you can see 2 pictures. One of them is what Aaron and I like to call the twin zucchini, and the other, well, I know what you're thinking, but it's a pear. Truly, I've never seen anything like it, and it totally made my summer. Anyways, I want to flip the question back to you. Now that you've seen all these atrocious things just like I did, what are you going to do to reduce your food wastage? If you don't know where to start, I have a few suggestions. First, look beyond the outside. Second, support your local food system. That's also a great way to reduce your carbon footprint. And last but not least, put in a little more work, whether that be meal planning, regrowing your food, or chopping up damaged parts and freezing them. And if you're like me and have some ambitions to make some change in the world and solve some of the world's biggest problems, go for it. You never know until you try. Thank you.